Hello everyone and welcome back at CodingBulls. Today we will continue our beginner's tutorial of C++ series. We will continue where we left off, and today we will look at more variables and basic expressions of C++. We already learned about the integer. Let's take a look at more variables. Boolean means that it can be either true or false. By the way, this double slashes is a comment. If you want to comment your code, you can write double slashes and everything you write after that line will be ignored by the compiler and you can write anything. Another way to do a comment is to type slash and style. Then everything until you type style and slash will be ignored. So this is a comment. So a bool variable can be either true or false. If you define outside of any function, the default value will be false. Now we can assign a value of it true, or we can assign the value false anytime we want. Interesting thing is we can also output a bool variable, but it will be either 1 or 0. 1 meaning true and 0 being false. We can also set the values of a Boolean variable by assigning them 0 as false and 1 as true. But it's more readable if you write false or true instead. Now, a bool variable is mostly used to check if a condition is met. The reason for this, it's really useful, is we have an if statement. The way it looks is you type if, then 2 brackets, and anything you type between these 2 brackets has to be a Boolean value. If that condition is met, then the code here will be executed. If it's not met, then the code here will be ignored and the execution will continue after the next line. You can also put an else line, meaning that if this condition here is not met, then the execution will continue here. If the condition is met, the execution will continue here, and after it's done, it will continue after the else line. So let's say we put it if b is true, then we will see out b is true, and line. Otherwise, yeah, see out b is false. So if you go ahead and hit enter it, you can see that b is false in this example. We can also put more lines in this if statement. We can do it with the else if function, meaning that if this statement is not true, then we will check this statement, and if it is true, we will execute it here, otherwise we will go ahead at the end of the line. We can put as many else if lines as we want, and we can end with any else statement. This is completely optional. You can also remove this without any else statement in the end. Sometimes you need it, sometimes you don't. It's possible to put it here, so I will show you in this way. So let's say that if b is true, then we know that the b value is true. Here we know that b is false. Let's say another type of if statement. Here we put a single variable. We will check if a is equal to here. The most common way, if you want to write it, would be this, but this is actually incorrect. If you want to assign a value of a, this would be correct. But if you want to check if a variable is the same as another variable, you need 2 equal signs. So this operator means that if a is equals to, then we will go in here. So what do we know in this point? If the code reached this point, that means that b had to be false. Because if b is true, it will enter here, and all the other else statements will be ignored, and the execution will continue here. So we know b is false, and we also know that a is 2. Okay, now what if we reach this point? We can give another statement. If we show you another operator, let's say a is larger than 5. Then we will know that b is false. Actually, I will show a more complex example. If a is lower than 5, the reason this will be better is we can use these expressions to further see where we are. So we know that b is false because if b is true, b will be here, and this line will be ignored. And we know that a is not 2, otherwise we would enter here. And we know that a is lower than 5. In this example, it's strictly lower. If we want to check if it's lower or equal, we can use this operator. So in this example, is lower or equal to 5. Otherwise, we know that all of this was true, all of this was false. So we know that b is false, a is not 2, and a is not lower or equal to 5, which means that a is higher than 5. Let's take the input from a. And as you can see, b is assigned false here at the time. Let's say if a is string, then we know that the code will reach this part. If b, well, that's false, so we go ahead. As if a is equals to, that's also false, so we go further. Next as if statement, a is less or equal than 5. Oh, this is true, so we execute here, and the output b is false and a is 2, and a is lower than or equal to 5. In reality, these if and else if statements make it easier for you to control which code gets executed in different conditions. Now let's take another look at the while cycle. Similar to if, you need to write a true or false expression here. And if that expression is true, then the cycle will get executed. So let's say that we write here if while b is true. And then we do something in the cycle. The difference between while and if is after we finished executing this code, if b was true, then we will check the condition again. And we will continue in this cycle as long as b is true. So let's go ahead and set b is true here. And we will output that b is true. Now, this is a very common example of an infinite loop. Because we don't do anything here, b will always be true. So whatever we put in the input for a, the cycle will run forward, and as we can see, we just output b is true because it will always be true, and it will continue to run like that. So whenever you use a cycle, you need to make sure that it's not an infinite cycle. So inside the cycle, somehow you need to get out of it. There is 2 ways to do that. First, if the condition is not true anymore, or if you use a break expression. What this does is breaks out of the closest cycle that you are in. For example, it's the while b. So if you go ahead and try it, you give an input, even though b is always true, this expression gets out of the while cycle, and we can finish executing the code. The other way to do that is somehow set the b to false. Now we can go ahead and try other expressions. What if we put a here instead of b? Now we know that a is an integer, not a boolean. So the C++ will attempt to convert the integer value to a boolean, which is actually possible, and the way it does it is it will be true if a is not 0, it will be false if a is 0. So it will be the same as we say that while a is not 0. The way we write not 0 is this operator. This means that the value on the left is not the same as the value on the right. I will use this example, and let's say that we will see out that a is not 0. And then we will decrease the value of a by 1. There are two ways to do it. Two simple ways. A equals a minus 1. If we want to avoid this, we can output that a should be minus equal 1. This minus equal means that we should decrease the value by the expression on the right side. We have the plus equal, which means that we need to increase it. We can also multiply it or divide it. These are basic operations that make life a little easier. Now, because we want to decrease with 1 the a value, you can also type a minus minus. The minus minus operator just decreases the value. We have the pair of it, the a plus plus, which increases the value. We can actually type the minus on the left or the right side. In this example, it doesn't matter. In reality, the difference is that this operation has a returned value by itself. So if we have another integer that I put the brackets so you can see it better. We have another integer of this, then this is actually a value that gets returned. So in this example, if we put minus minus, the c will be the new value of a. So the value after we decreased. If we put a minus minus, it will actually return the value of a, then it will decrease. So the c will be the old value of a. This is important in some cases where you have a y function and you put an expression like this, y a minus minus. This means that we will decrease the value of a and also check if it's 0 or not. Back to our example, let's use minus minus a. So if we close the window, click on it, and say, let's say a is 5. Now we know that a is not 0. We repeat it 5 times, and then we will end the code. So what if we use the a minus minus? We put 5. Then we can see that the cycle ends, because every time we check for the condition, a will be decreased by 1, and we will repeat it 5 times. And if we put a minus minus a, then it will only run 4 times, because as this operator works, it will decrease the value of a, then it will return. So when a is 1, it will decrease it to 0, and will return 0, so it's not true anymore, so we don't enter the cycle. So the correct way to repeat something a times is a minus minus. Or you need to make sure that that value is actually positive, or otherwise, if we put minus 5 for a, and as we can see, we will run infinitely because it's always negative and we don't reach 0. Therefore, a better cycle for something to repeat a given number of times is a for cycle. It's really similar to the while cycle, but the condition here will be different. First, we can assign a number, then we can give a condition, let's say a is less than a, then we can give an operation that runs after every cycle. Now, let's say C out, and then E is less than A. So, if you look at this, what it will do is takes a value A and run from 0 until A is still less than A, and after we complete a cycle, every time we'll increase the E value by 1. In this example, it doesn't matter if you write ++e or e++, it's the same, because we don't use the return value anywhere. So you can use whichever is more comfortable for you. If we go ahead and run it, you can see that 0 is less than a, 1 is less than a, 2, 3, and 4 is less than a. So we can repeat this until the e value is less than a. The reason this is good is sometimes you want to go ahead and do the code multiple times depending on the value. And you can also put an if function here. If e equals 3, then you can say out e is 3. Obviously, you can do any other more complicated stuff. This just shows you that depending on the e value, we can do different things about it. That's why it's really powerful too. Now, what happens if we input a negative value for a? In the while cycle, it resulted in an infinite loop. But in this case, we don't even enter the cycle because 0 is not less than -1. Therefore, it works correctly and we just don't enter the cycle. So maybe we want to do something different if the a is a negative value. The way we do this is we put the if statement. If a is less than 0, that means that it's negative, then we want to do something. And otherwise we will run this for a cycle. The way we can do it is with the else statement. So now we go ahead, copy this code, and we will put it inside the else statement. As you can see, the code got pushed away, so we can select this code and press tab to move it a good space. Now, it's really important that if you press one of these brackets, its pair will show up to you. So you can easily see that this else statement contains the code between these two brackets. So this else statement contains this for loop. So if the a is less than 0, we will execute this code. And if a is not less than 0, if a is less than 0, then we will execute this code up. So let's say that we want to do something with a. Then we can output that a is less than 0. As you can see, if you put -4, then we will just put out that a is less than 0. But if a is larger than 0, then we can do our for cycle correctly. Now let's take a look at other variables. Let's look at the character. See, and we go ahead and test this code. So we will take a character from the input, and then we will make a string from it. A string is basically a series of characters. So let's see that s is equals hello world, meaning that s contains these characters in a sequence. We can use the plus equal operator for a string to add a character or another string to it. So we will put the input word next to at the end of the s. Then we can refer to s's characters and f's length. So let's say that we want to see out s.size. This will output the length of s, how many characters it contains. So s dot and the size function. And if you are wondering, this is a function that has been already written for us in the standard library, so we can use it without writing it. So if we go ahead and add it, we can input 3, and it will be 13. So the 3 here, in this case, won't be a number, but a character. So if we want to see out S as well, then we can see that it will be hello world and then a 3 in the end. But we can also put another character like W. So it will be hello world and then a W. We can also use these C values to refer if C is equals to a given character, like if C is D. By the way, when you refer character, you need to put them between these. So if C is D, then we will see out C is D. And now what's interesting is character wise, if you output a capital D, that's different. So you can see it didn't say that C is D. Then if we output a lowercase character. Interesting thing about strings is you can refer to a specific character of a string. Let's say we want to output the first character of S. And it's important that in programming we start indexing from 0. So the first character will be referred by the number 0. So between these brackets you provide the character that you want, then we will output it. So if we put here, so this is the string, this is the first character, which is 0. If we want to get the last character, that will be s.size minus 1, because we start indexing at 0, so the last character will be less, 1 less than the length. So that will be the same character that we input here in C. So if we input a capital P, we'll get a capital P there. So you can use this operator to access any character of the S. You can also use it to change character. Let's say we want to change the character of S. I will read some of these codes. That we want to change this L to another number. This will be the second character, 0, 1, 2. Should be equal to another character. You need to provide a character here, which is F. So if we go ahead and run it and input the character, you can see that it will become F word. We can also change it to the character C, which will be our input. So if we input any character, then it will change that character. Let's take a look at some other integer type of variables other than the int. We have unsigned int. The difference between an int and an unsigned int is that the int can be negative and the unsigned int can't. So if we have, let's say, a0, which is an integer, d is 0, which is an unsigned integer. Now we decrease the value of a by 1 and also the value of d by 1. Now we will see out that a is a, and then we will see that d is d. So what will happen is a as an integer will be negative, but d will be a random number. 0 minus 1 is definitely not that. The reason for this is called integer overflow, which happens when a value stored for an integer is too low or too high. In this case, 0 minus 1 is negative 1, but an unsigned integer's minimum value is 0. Therefore, it will overflow and result in a bad value. So every time you use an integer, you need to be careful that it is capable of storing that value. This is the maximum value that we can store with the 32 bits that we have if it's an unsigned integer. If it's a signed integer, the first byte is used to indicate that if it's positive or negative, therefore it will be to the 31st value. If we want a larger integer, we need to use an integer called long int. Now let's see what happens if we set the A value to 100,000 and the value to 100,000 as well. And we want to calculate A times A and A times E. As you can see, we can use this operator which multiplies A by itself. Now we will say out that A is A and E is E. Because 100,000 times 100,000 is too large for an integer. It will overflow and have an incorrect result. But a long integer which contains 64 byte bits, but a long integer that contains 62 bits instead of 32, we'll be able to calculate it and has the correct value. So make sure to calculate the maximum minimum possible values in the code so you know which value you need to use. A normal integer or long integer or an unsigned integer. And with these different variables, you can also have different return values for functions. So let's say function that gets a character as an input and also a number as an input will output something. Go ahead and delete all the variables that we have. And let's say that we want a character from the input. We also want an integer from the input. And then we will output the f function of that character and that integer. So let's say that the f function puts the same character over again as many times as the A is. So go ahead and try to solve this function. There are many possible solutions. I will show you one of the easiest. So we will take a look at the for cycle. You can also do it as a while cycle. So this means repeat A times. If A is positive, then we will have a string outside and we add the C character to it, and in the end we will return that string as an answer for this problem. So if we go ahead and run it, we say that we want the P character repeated 12 times, then we will get 12 P's. Also, if you want a function that can only take values which will become negative, you can instead use an unsigned integer, and you can also use an unsigned integer here as well. Another way to do it is to keep using an integer. And here, if A is less than 0, you will output to the error stream that A shouldn't be less than 0. And then you don't want to execute the following code. With the for cycle, it won't matter because the string may be empty. But sometimes if you write a while function, while cycle, or anything that could break if you have a negative value here, you don't want to finish this. So you will return another value here. Remember that after you return a function, it won't execute here. So if we go and create on it, then we say that we want the character minus 5 times, then we have this error that A shouldn't be less than 0. And we will safely return without crashing. I hope you found this interesting and helpful. In the next video, we will look at other variable types and we'll start looking at some easier tests that you can do with programming. As always, if you like this, make sure to like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.